guys, how are you? Today I'm doing a fall video, which I'm so excited about. I'm gonna give you a few recommendations of books I have read, and then we're gonna go into my kind of hopefuls for this season, and maybe you'll get some recommendations from there as well. I am so excited that it is fall time. I love this season. Fall and winter are my favorite times of the year. I love all the holidays, so I'm just very excited to start the fall and spooky and seasonal reads. I don't feel like I've read a lot of like fall and Halloween specific books in my reading career. I did read a few last year and I didn't love all of them, so I'm not going to recommend them to you today. So again, I definitely want to build my TBR and find new books during this time of year, but we're going to start. Also, I'm wearing my Halloween Town sweatshirt, which is my favorite. I got it off Etsy. We're going to start with the books I have read so I can give you my direct thoughts and kind of a brief synopsis of what they're about. The first one I have is Katherine House by Elizabeth Thomas. This is a dark academia book set in a school. I really loved this book. I'm actually in the middle of doing a video and this was the one I chose for it, and it has a really low rating on Goodreads. And I disagree. I gave it 5 stars. I read it in one night. I started it at like 10:30 p.m. and stayed up till around 3 to read it. To me, this was the epitome of dark academia because you go into a boarding school. They're not allowed to leave. So the school is free, but you have to stay there all 3 years. And the main purpose is so that you really dive into what you're there for, and a lot of like senators and famous people and like artists have stayed here and been really successful. So they have a good turnover rate, but obviously not being able to leave or communicate with outside people gives you an eerie feeling from the beginning. As you would expect, things don't really go as planned, but I really liked that you're kind of questioning it from the beginning. And it does have a semi-ambiguous ending, which I really enjoy. I love when books are kind of out there or lead things to interpretation. And this book does that really well in my opinion. So if you like those kind of books, I highly recommend. I know those aren't for everyone, and a lot of people love a solid ending, so I think that's probably why it doesn't have a very high rating. But I think this is perfect for this time of year. They're going into the school year, so if you're looking for a book along those lines, highly recommend. The next one is just a good thriller recommendation, and it is quite a popular one, but that is The Silent Patient by Alex I hate last names are always so hard. This is by Alex Michaelides. This book was so good. Actually, I also read this in one sitting, which I don't do often, so that says something about both of these books. It was such a page turner, and it's one that you finish and could immediately read again, I guess, if you liked it. But I finished it and was very, very close to literally just starting it over, because I love when thrillers, like, the ending is prevalent throughout the story, but you as the reader just can't see it yet. But once the ending and the twist happens, you can look back on the rest of the story and see it unfold. I'm not a big fan when thrillers like add someone in the third act and they're like, oh, that's who did it. It's kind of a cop-out in my opinion, and it's less fun when they just have nothing to do with the story, because then what's the point? But this one, it's very prevalent throughout the whole story, so you could definitely go back and read it and see so many hints, and I definitely would love to reread it sooner than later. This is not fall specific, but I just think this is a really great thriller, so if you're in the mood for kind of a spooky book and a quick read, this is a great choice. The next one is a fantasy, and I love this series so much. Honestly, I'm just going to talk about it whenever I remotely have the opportunity to. It is a duology, which I think is really fun for fantasy because you are able to stay in the world for a bit, but you're not committed to a 5 or 7 book series. But that is For the Wolf by Hannah Witten, and then For the Throne is the second book. I've annotated these very heavily, and I love them so much. So the first one is a Red Riding Hood retelling, but it's pretty loose. Like, you can definitely see the elements that are Red Riding-esque, but it doesn't take over the story, and it doesn't feel like the author is just trying to hit these plot points to follow the original fairy tale. So it definitely feels like she took inspiration and took it her completely own route, which I think is really good and powerful in a retelling situation. You are following two sisters, the youngest one, or the second daughter of this city, part of like the royal sector. The second daughter has to be sacrificed to the woods, and that's kind of what you go into this story and what they tell you right off the bat. You're obviously following the sister through the story, so it's really fun. And then the second book follows the older sister, which is really fun because in this one you get multiple point of views, which was so fun. In this book you get, primarily you get 2 point of views, but you get a few from the other side characters, and at this point you know who everyone is, so it doesn't get confusing at all. And I do love in these books, there is a cast of characters, but it's not too big that it's hard to follow along. There's like 8 significant names that occur frequently in this book, which I do not think is a lot at all. And it makes it to be a really, really fun fantasy, but not a super brain heavy book. Also, these books are romantasy, so take with that what you will. There's a few other tropes in here. It is very extremely good. I went into the first one and the second one not knowing that they were romance, and I was pleasantly and happily surprised. But I love it because the romance doesn't take over the story, and I think sometimes in romantasy, like, it cheapens the fantasy to a certain extent because you are so focused on that you're not, like, the author might not world build as much as they would have if it was only a fantasy book. But this book, the romance is just added in. It is definitely a pretty heavy plot point in both of the books, but it doesn't take away, like, if you pulled the romance out of these books, you would still have an amazing, beautiful, chunky story. These books, there is like winter elements and there's a lot of nature talk, especially in the first one, which I love because I do think there is a lot of symbolism in these books about duality and good and bad in nature and the roles humans have in their relationship with nature. I do think this is good for fall because you do have a lot of talk about nature. It is kind of cold and snowy at many points throughout the book, so please just pick this up either way. I don't hear anyone talk about it, and it is so good. The next is a series. I've actually only read the first one, but I have the first 2 here, and I'm planning on getting the third one. I know this is controversial, like a lot of people don't like this book, but I like it because it is so cheesy. So that is The Ex-Hex by Erin Sterling. The second one is The Kiss Curse, and I know the third one is coming out this year. In this one, a girl goes through a breakup, and so as kind of a joke, she goes to hex her ex, but she kind of stops halfway through. They're actual witches, but she didn't actually try to hex him. And then you kind of flash forward maybe 10 years in the future, and you realize she did, so you're kind of following through that. It is very cheesy. They're in a tourist town for kind of, think like Salem, Mass, right? Like, they're kind of marketed to be spooky and witchy. So the family actually owns like a witch shop for tourists. You have like an actual like, ooh, like a spooky ghost. I really don't remember much about this book, but it was just so fun and had all the elements of like a Disney witchy movie. So I really do think this is perfect for Halloween and fall time. Again, don't go in expecting anything more than a cute rom-com, but I actually did really enjoy it. I think I'm gonna maybe reread this year just because it is so short, and then go into the second and third books. But I think these are cute reads. The next 2 are probably like the ultimate, specifically fall and autumnal books that I have. The first one is If We Were Villains by Emma Rio. I adored this book so much. This is your classic like dark academia school setting where you have multiple characters and they're in a friend group. Someone has died in the friend group and you're kind of learning and unraveling what happened. So you have a then and now timeline. In the now timeline, the person that took the fall for the murder has been released from prison. So you're kind of getting the story from that point of view, or from them like rediscussing it in the now. But then you flash forward to then, and that's where you spend most of your time. And that's where they're in the school setting and it's leading up to the events of what happened. So you do have the mystery aspect of being able to kind of figure out and trying to figure out who did it. But they are in a school for the arts. It is a very like prestigious academy and they are all actors. There's only like 7 people in their whole grade and that's who you follow. They live in their own like tower. The school itself is basically an old mansion and I really loved it. I think really anyone could love it, but I'm a big Shakespeare girl and this has so many Shakespearean references because that's what they're studying. So they're in plays about Shakespeare and they reference Shakespeare or they do scenes or they quote it. And it's not heavy enough where like if you read Shakespeare in high school and you didn't like it, it's not written in that way. It's not going to take away from your reading, in my opinion. It's just that if you do know anything, it adds to the story. So it takes it from, you know, like 5-star moments to 6-star moments because you are able to, there's like hints to what's happening and there's allusions and like parallels between Shakespeare and his work and the story itself. So kind of once I started realizing that, it was so fun to try and connect the dots from my background prior knowledge into this book. I know a lot of people describe this writing as like prestigious, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It's really good writing. It is very descriptive, and I will say it did take me probably like 50-75 pages to figure out who each character was individually because they're talked about as a group so much. But once you get, you know, into the book, it is very good. This was a 5-star read for me. I would love to reread it and annotate it at some point. I will say this book is very similar to In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, but I liked this one way more, and I love Ashley Winstead. I am like the biggest advocate for her. I think she is incredible and so talented, but that book wasn't my favorite, and I think it was because I was comparing it to If We Were Villains so much. It is very similar in like the school and the group of students. I think if you liked one, you could definitely like the other, but this one was just more of a favorite for me than that one was. But that's another good one. That is like a crowd favorite. Everyone loves that book. It is really good, but this one is just a better version in my opinion. The last book I have is a recent read of mine, and that is The Only One Left by Riley Sager. I really love this book. After reading it and seeing more people review and talk about it, I mean, I knew it wasn't perfect to begin with, but the very end of this book is very much out of left field. So I do understand the critiques of this book, but I just think it was so fun from the beginning reading the story. And even though the ending was out of left field and kind of cheesy, it did like kind of pull in some moments from the middle of the story that there were still questions about. So he did have to do something to tie it all together, and maybe he could have done something a little better, but I still think it was really good. You have your like gothic mansion on a cliff. You have this woman in the house who's presumed to have murdered her entire family when she was younger, and she's basically been ostracized to live in her house, and a girl goes in to be a live-in caretaker. I think the writing was really good. The setting and the gothic tone was there from page 1. So I think this is definitely a very good read for fall to kind of get in your cozy setting with the candles and a nice like soundscape going on. Very good. I've only read 2 of his books, but I would say this one's more approachable than The House Across the Lake. So depending on where you stand with him, I think this is a good one to read. Next, I'm going to talk about some books that I would really like to get to this season. These, I would say, are a little bit more directly related to fall and winter time. But the first one I want to talk about is Ashley Winstead's new release. I am just so excited. I really love her writing. Her rom-coms are 5 stars for me. I think they're very well written. I loved The Last Housewife. But this one, I know she posted something that said like this is like her most like out of left field book she has written thus far, which I think is crazy because The Last Housewife was definitely out there and I enjoyed it, but I'm definitely excited to see what she does next. Okay, so the first one, maybe not very fall, but I just really want to get to this soon. That is Good Rich People by Liza Jane Brazier. This is a thriller, and it's kind of like rich people acting odd, which I love those kind of books, and I just think this book is so good. I don't know anything about it. I haven't seen any reviews. I haven't seen people talk about it, so I would just love to get to this soon. It keeps eyeing me. The next one, I definitely have to read this because I got this and I intentionally have like not even looked at it until this time of year. That is Cruel Illusions by Margie Fuston. This is a Fairy Loot edition. It has something to do with vampires. It is a young adult fantasy. It's from their young adult book box, but I want to say this came out at least 6 months ago. I mean, this is just definitely perfect for this time of year. You have like the Gothic mansion. The next one is one that I've seen people talk about often recently, but this was my Fairy Loot book for October of last year. That is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I think the second one is coming out very soon, and I think that's why more people are talking about it at the moment. But I do remember, look at that little creature. Isn't that creepy? The next one I have is a recent Book of the Month book, and I don't really remember what it's about. I think it has some like magic and sisters, but that is Ink Blood Sister Scribe by Emma Torres. I do want to go into this pretty blind, but I love the cover. Next is a book I've been wanting to read for so long and I didn't own physically, but I'm actually going to be annotating it for a friend, and then she's doing the same for a book that was off of my TBR, so I'm very excited, and it's the perfect time of year. But that is Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Haro. I've heard great things about this book. I've heard that from many different people who have many different reading tastes. It is a slightly thicker book. It's 500 pages. The text is actually a good size in my opinion, but I'm excited to get to this. This is clearly about witches, so I think that is very exciting. The next one is one I've had for so long, and I love weird books, so I am excited to read this because I know it's like unconventional and makes people uncomfortable, but I am just very excited. And that is Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Basterica. Okay, this is an Argentinian novel and it's been translated. It's basically about a cannibal. It is extremely short. It's 200 pages. I am so excited to read this. I think this would be really good to read in some sort of reading vlog or reading challenge that is spooky themed. So definitely looking forward to this one. The last one is Sign Here by Claudia Lux. This is another Book of the Month book. I've been holding on to it. I know it's like humor, romance, devil, so it's not a serious one, but definitely looks very fun. So hope to get to this soon. That is all the books I have for you. As I'm talking, I'm like thinking of more books I want to read and more books I'm excited for and more books to recommend. I'll be back with more videos and more comments and more thoughts, but this is kind of my preliminary thought process. I definitely am eyeballing a lot of these to pick up very soon. Thank you guys for watching. If you have watched to the end of this video, please leave a black heart emoji below. I hope you guys are very excited for this season 2. I hope it stays nice and chilly and cool for a very long time, and you don't have 100-degree weather for my southern people, and you don't have crazy snow in the next 2 weeks for my northern people. So thank you guys so much for sticking around, and I will see you very soon. Bye.